No, yeah, I think you're 100% correct there. And I think that there's pros and cons to both, right? I mean, LaRon Stokes is the defensive newcomer of the year last year, and I think that somehow gets missed in this discussion because he comes out of, I mean, I'm very proud of LaRon Stokes because he's a Tulsa grown kid and he's a junior college grown kid in Oklahoma coming out of NOAA, which I think makes him the first homeschooled high school kid to earn a scholarship to play football at Oklahoma, and then goes to NEO and shows out and shows up to Oklahoma and to play in a scheme he wasn't recruited to play in, or not even that, not even know what the scheme was going to be, right? And announces himself alongside Neville Gallimore, Dylan Fomital, and Marquise Overton, which, is not an easy group to break into, right? And you're looking at this defensive line now. I see a kid that played more basketball than he's played football. I see a junior college kid that needed to be developed into a tackle that can play at either one of those positions, either that 3 technique or that 1 technique. And behind them, I see an unproven kid in perhaps Marcus Hicks. Stripling's going to play in. And behind him, Troy James left. We're still waiting on a couple of these kids to really grow up and do something. It's not a hodgepodge, but I think Grinch deserves credit for developing what was there and knowing what he wants to bring in, because we can't argue with the turnaround. Is it a top 10 defense? No. Is it a kind of defense that can win a college football playoff national championship? We saw what it was last year, but I think it's unfair to have these conversations about where the kids come from and have more conversations about what they turn out to be once they're at Oklahoma. I mean, I guess a frequent whipping boy on this end would be, Brendan Radley Hiles has tremendous pedigree, right? Between Calabasas and IMG and now here as a 5-star defensive back, that was the dude that was supposed to show out. And we can make a great argument. Both LaRon Stokes and Jalen Redmond outplayed him last year, along with a couple of other kids that, just slotted into a position that fit them. I'm still riding for Buki being a cornerback, and I'm probably going to take that one to my grave because he's probably never going to get an opportunity to play cornerback. But to take that conversation a little bit further, Oklahoma has done a tremendous job of recruiting junior college dudes across the defense for the last couple of years. We're still waiting on Justin Harrington to get to campus, and let alone what he's going to be and what could end up looking like over there. But I think the only position where they haven't had to do that is linebacker, right?
Yeah, I mean, that's probably the one position group that they haven't really had to pursue any sort of JUCO talent. And I know that we all have our different perceptions of linebacker recruiting at the University of Oklahoma, but it's kind of outstanding that they haven't had to go the JUCO route at this stage.
And I would agree with that. I also think that when we're looking at the rankings and we're looking at the sheer number of recruits out there aren't very many defensive tackles, and there aren't very many 6'2", 6'3" corners and safeties for that matter, right? There's going to be a few other guys that you could slot in inside linebacker that could play safety and can play edge. I mean, I guess Kenneth Murray Jr. and Deshaun White are both glaring examples of this because Murray was brought in as an edge player, moved the inside, and then thrived playing inside and then playing edge on third down last year. Deshaun White was a safety in high school who was recruited as an outside linebacker, who slotted to inside almost immediately once he got to Oklahoma. So I think there's more versatility to be found at the linebacker level in high school than there is at any other position in, high school, especially when you try to run the scheme that Grinch runs, which is skinny and fast up front, and long and fast on the back end. He's basically inversed what we would normally call traditional football defense. And it's working, but it's just hard, right? And because it's hard, you're going to flip over rocks and you're going to go find kids that we would probably label as projects. Like Jordan Mooks, I think, fits this billing. A kid that's played more basketball than football, but is nearly 6'4", with tremendous range and tremendous feet. Justin Harrington's still growing at 6'3", 215. It's just like if you think you can coach him up and you want to coach him up, then you just got to go get what's there. I kind of think about it in the way that we think about 7-footers in the NBA, because we're like, man, how does a dude get to the NBA and not be able to had the fundamentals of basketball down. That's because he never played. They just kind of go in to find him. As a matter of fact, I read this stat in the Sports Gene's David Epstein. 1 in 12 7-footers on the face of the planet play in the NBA. Think about that. Just for a second. You know, 1 in 12 7-foot people walking around, regardless of gender, play in the NBA. So when you find one, you just go get him and hope to teach him something. And sometimes you end up with Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. Sometimes you end up with Darko Milicic. You know, it's just, and I think that's what Grinch is deciding to do with his defensive recruiting.
Yeah, and to further your point about the linebacker thing, you also have to understand, and it's always been something that's fascinated me, the way that Alex Grinch is going to have to recruit to the system will ask a lot more various angles. So as a result, I mean, we talk about the inside linebacker. There's more position versatility, as you mentioned, but there's also fewer candidates to go and find. I mean, you're really playing, as we saw last season, Alex Grinch really only utilized 2, 3, 4 inside linebackers at most. It was really that 3-man rotation of K9, Deshaun White, and Caleb Kelly that got the job done down the stretch. But then you're also talking about a scheme that's really asking you to find probably 4 defensive tackles that can start games for you when you think about how he used Fa'amatu, how he used Q Overton, how he used Neville Gallimore, Jalen Redmond. And then you're also wondering, okay, not only does he have to have 5 starting caliber defensive backs, but he has to find guys that can rotate and still provide effective minutes. So as a result, I mean, these recruiting classes are going to have to look a lot different than maybe Oklahoma fans are used to, especially when you look at other teams and how they're finding their various prospects, because there are teams out there that are going to go take the 5'9" corner. But right now, I mean, Alex Grinch has set in stone what he's looking for. And so as a result, it's going to look a little bit different when you think about the junior college players that are going to have to come in, the position versatility guys that you're mentioning, some of the projects that will have to be ready to be developed, maybe redshirt a season. It's just something that has to be built. And I think this is where you have to reiterate the concept of patience for Sooner fans, because, I mean, what Alex Grinch was able to accomplish last season was nothing short of a miracle. Let's be honest with ourselves. I mean, the guy took him from outside the 120s to inside the top 25, top 30, and now he has a projectable defense that could be inside the top 20. We'll see what happens. I think they have a favorable schedule to accomplish that, but at the same time, I mean, what he's already done is incredible. And in order to get where Oklahoma fans want him to get to, there's still some project to be accomplished. So as a result, it's something that's going to have to be a little bit flexible. I know that he's molded this specific recruiting approach, and he wants to continuously accomplish that and not really bend. But if that's going to be his pace, then he's going to have to understand, and Oklahoma fans will have to understand with him, that his recruiting model may look a little bit different than other defensive coordinators across the country.
I want to hit on this thing about Alex Grinch and what he was able to do in 2019, because I really think you can skew the data however you want to, because that was the kind of season that they played, not because that's what I'm trying to do. But, you know, you're holding UCLA to 14 points. It's not a good football team, right? You're holding Texas Tech to 16 points. It's not a good football team. You're holding Kansas to 20 points. It's not a good football team. West Virginia to 14. It's a bad football team. You come up against some teams that can play, right? Houston puts up 31. You come up against a team that can play in Texas. We can talk about that last 7 points that they scored and at 34-27, but we would call that a one-sided affair for the defense, I think, for Oklahoma. The Kansas State game is glaring, right? 48 points from that team and the way that they're constructed should never happen. And then Iowa State dropped 40 the next week, right? Baylor scores 31, but you basically hold them scoreless for the most part in the second half. So I think we would count that as a win, even as the score says 31 points. Oklahoma State, I think we would count as a win. You held Chuba Hubbard to just over 100 in a year where he's rushing for more than 2,000. Texas Christian 24, we count that as a win. Baylor to 23, that was an absolutely outstanding game. And then there's the LSU game where he gave up 63. So, I mean, it's for football people, I think we would say, sure, absolutely. Alex Grinch did a great job, considering most of the kids, most of the kids on that defense aren't his. Like, I want to say, like, David Ugwebu is the only one that he actually recruited and signed that played on that defense. And everybody else is just trying to learn as they go, along with this new staff. And I think when you put it in perspective and you put it, what did they do and how did they play, you can really tie it up in, did the defensive line play well and did the safeties play well? And that's his calling card, right? And the thing that he would grade us on, and we would think of, because he grades himself on this, is where were the takeaways? You know, I think that would be the one thing that I think we could all knock him for if we wanted to. He didn't achieve his own takeaway number. He didn't even get close. You know, and what happens if they do get close? How much better are they if they get to those 24 takeaways that equal 9 wins, regardless of what the offense does? Is that out of line, or just?
No, that's where I would agree with you wholeheartedly in saying, look, what Alex Grinch accomplished a season ago was incredible, but it's also leaving work to be done. I mean, we can talk about the turnover numbers, the tackles for loss. I think some of the run defense statistics, obviously they rank towards the top in the Big 12 in terms of general, but if you really dive into the specifics of their run defense, there were some things that could certainly be fixed, and I think some of that has to do with the adjusting to the scheme, the lighter boxes, I mean, things of that nature. So that's where you're talking about exactly the problem that's still ahead of Alex Grinch and this defensive staff, not only in terms of on-field play, but in recruiting. Yes, what they did was remarkable, and they took a unit that was in dire needs of a flip, and they accomplished that. They got them to heights that maybe those players didn't even necessarily expect out of themselves. But that doesn't mean that the work is over. That still means that, okay, they've got X number of spots to climb up until they're considered a top-tier defense, not only in the eyes of the college football landscape, but of the recruits who are eventually joining them. So, yes, it's fair to be somewhat critical of Grinch and that crew right now because, as we said, there were still things left on the table that they wanted to grab. But even then, you have to understand that now that Grinch is able to reach these certain statistics, now that he's able to get some of these top-tier JUCO players, whereas before him, it may not be the case either way. And we can talk about the scores or whatever, but bottom line here, you never know how a game goes. Some of those games they probably drop before he gets there, not just because of his schemes, but how he was able to lead that group and how Roy Manning, Brian Odom, and the rest of that squad was able to get these guys to rally together in times of adversity. So the progress is being made. But right now we also have to understand that, okay, just because he's accomplishing things and he's setting goals and he's marking a few off, there are still things left to be checked away. And once those are able to be checked away, that's when I think Sooner fans will finally be pleased, not only in terms of on-field statistics and results, but also recruiting rankings, recruiting classes, things of that nature. So as a result, I mean, I can't say enough about what Grinch did, but I think he would be one of the first people to admit, yes, we got the right direction, but there's still a ways to go. And so it's going to be very fun to follow what comes next season and in the seasons moving forward.